So Sven, thank you again so much for agreeing to talk with me, and congratulations on 25 years of TechTour. It's pretty amazing.
Thank you
And
very much.
I think the first question is what caused you to start TechTour? What was in your mind? What was going on that was the reason why you wanted to start TechTour 25 years ago?
Yeah, when I started the tech tour, I had already more than 10 years of venture capital experience. And I realized that having worked on both sides of the Atlantic, the way that venture capital was conceived in Silicon Valley and in Europe was uh, different. And the experience was very different. The maturity of the market were different. But I realized that the Europeans were trying just to mimic the US, like 2 hours from the office.
Mhm.
And when you are in Silicon Valley and you are 2 hours from your office and you have all these great companies, you can find ample number of companies. But when you are in Norway or in Sweden, etc., you don't have the same density around the office. And I realized that all the VCs in Europe were just mimicking the 2 hours from the office from the US.
Mm.
And it simply was not really making sense because the ecosystem was not ready. And most of the VCs in Europe did not have the same background than basically the US guys, more coming from management consultant in Europe and investment banking, etc. While in the US, you had people basically build company from zero to large companies, and they've seen the film before.
Right.
So when I was responsible for Vision Capital for Europe, I realized now I have to invest all around Europe because we were one of the first transatlantic fund, but pan-European fund. That means
Mm.
our investment ground was full Europe. And I said, how can I do venture capital from one office, and having basically an overview of what's going on all over Europe? And I realized that most of the VCs were like specialized in their area, but they were not really communicating with each other. They have
Mm.
no clue what was going on in another country, and everyone was starting same kind of companies trying to mimic a little bit the US, and there was no really understanding of the global ecosystem, and the companies that started in with proximity capital did not have the advice from people who basically grew company global. And so I saw that there was a gap, and we are talking about the end of the 90s, 1998. But all the ID came, from 95 to 98, and what I wanted to do is an organization that is open source, where every VCs and corporate investors and corporates and people in the ecosystem would collaborate to help companies to move from local to global. And my idea was, the more success stories we have about Europe, even if it's my competitor who basically makes a big win, it helps the ecosystem. So it was
Mm.
more an
Mm.
idea about how can we help the ecosystem and work together and not in competition. And that is where the idea about the tech tour came. But
Mm.
the main idea is, you look at Silicon Valley as a mainframe, and you look at Europe as a distributed computing. So
Mm.
it was basically the strength was in the network versus like in the concentration in Silicon Valley. And
That's
I've been basically, very much vocal about every region in Europe claiming that they were the next Silicon Valley, because you know you don't reproduce a Silicon Valley like this. And I would say Silicon Valley is more a mindset than anything else.
Mm. So you've brought up two really good points. One, this proximity gap that was existing 25 years ago, and also an experience gap. You said so many of the investors at that time were coming from investment banking or some other area, or even from corporate, and then
Mhm.
trying to play in this space of entrepreneurship, which is very different. And so,
Yeah.
how do you see things being different today? I mean, I love your vision that you saw
Yeah.
it of not copying Silicon Valley, but figuring out how to use Europe's unique situation to create something different. How is it different today from what it was 25 years ago?
Yeah, I would say we had several evolution. The first evolution is that we've seen in mid 2000 is the ecosystem became more specialized. That means
Mm,
VCs realized that you know if you want to be a leader in VC, you need to have some specialty in order to get the best deal and to help also the companies, because the
mm,
purpose of a VC is not just to be a passive investor, is to earn basically the right to be an investor in that area because he can
mm,
contribute, right? So you've seen more and more VCs coming with focus. So there are three dimensions in venture capital. It's geography, stage, and industry.
mhm,
And so the each VC has basically worked on this three-dimensional matrix and position itself. And so the maturity moved more into a specialization by sector. You
mhm,
know, there are some sector that basically have the function the same way, and sectors who are completely different. If you are, for instance, in medtech or biotech or SaaS, it's very very different. Everything is it needs to be different,
mm,
and so it's difficult for one fund to do all this. So this basically had a direct consequence on the TechTour organization, which was more geographic. We were organizing tours. We were bringing 70 people, which are the food chain of capital you have in Silicon Valley, and it was a portable food chain. And instead of the entrepreneur moving to one central place, it's everyone. It's an ecosystem that moves and help basically the local countries. That was step one of the tech tour, and we were organizing then 4 tech tours per year,
mhm,
and then it was like the Olympics of the startup. Like every 4 years, the country was mobilizing. All the local VC were contributing for once,
mm,
and they wanted to show the best of the best,
mm,
and that proved to be very very successful, very useful. We had some incredible success stories, but the evolution forced us to change. And on top of these geographical tours where you move people, then we decided to do verticals. And
mm,
for
mm,
vertical, you bring all the people who invest in that vertical from all Europe. So
mm,
it was an anti-tech tour, if you want. And the large corporates and corporate VC loved it, because
mm.
if you are Medtronic, and you are investing for Medtronic, you want only the medtech companies. You don't want to go to a tech tour before where you had a little bit of medtech, a little bit of SaaS, a little bit
Exactly,
of something like
exactly.
that. So we changed that around 2005, 2006,
Mm,
and then we had this basically two version of the tech tour, one geographic and one vertical. Now we are in a new phase, I would
mhm,
say, where people are even more specialized, and where you have less gap into the market, but still, I think at a very early stage, entrepreneur, there is only one entrepreneur out of 100 that can get venture capital, but the
mm.
99 others still deserve to be helped, right?
Yeah,
And so there is a lot of reservoir and potential of people who maybe not be venture compatible from the onstart, but they need help, and that is where the tech tour is really playing a big role right now,
yeah.
by helping those guys to be prepared for venture capitalists or corporates, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really, really important phase that they have to go through. And so then the next question is kind of why did you decide to merge with Europe Unlimited, with William and that team? What was it that kind of brought on that?
Yeah, the idea was, I mean, first of all, we both started in 98. He started Europe Unlimited, I started the European Tech Tour organization. And William and I, we always been friends, and we were basically sharing views, etc.
Mm,
And at a certain point in 2013, Williams and my view were converging. he realized basically the benefit of having this, TechTour vertical and geography. And I realized that it was very important also to be closer to governments, institutions, etc.
Mm, mm,
And we realized that together we would be much stronger. And then I was a VC, so I had very little bandwidth. I was giving 20% of my time for free.
mm,
Plus, I was a sponsor. My firms always sponsor the TechTour with money. William basically has built a great organization. It was a bigger organization, and so we together had this idea of how we can make it evolve
mm,
as one single organization. And then we were all speaking about opening an office in Eastern Europe, and also to have basically the combined Europe together, and
mm,
that was making a lot of sense. So we
mm,
basically merge around that idea of involving Bulgaria as part of the
mm.
Switzerland and Brussels, and I think it was a really right thing to do.
Yeah, I do too, and that's really, really interesting timing on the whole thing. I remember having discussions with William back in 2013, 2014, when he was first kicking around the idea of merging the two companies together.
Yeah.
And we ended up spending a lot of time talking about collaboration and about the importance of collaboration. Um, I've heard the saying before that if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, build a team.
Mhm.
And so I'm just curious, how have you seen this merged tech tour and Europe Unlimited, becoming the modern tech tour? How have you seen it changing in terms of how it's affecting the community, both the investor community as well as the entrepreneur community?
Yeah, very good question. I think to start with, it starts with a mindset and with values, right?
Mm,
And the reason why I had no hesitation to work with William is because of his values.
mm,
He is someone very integer. He wants to help the ecosystem. I think money is important, but it comes second. And to help the ecosystem is really his passion.
mm,
And I could not basically have done that with someone who had like different views about these values, pure basic values that are fundamental. Now, working together has been relatively easy. He's taken the leadership role from the onset, built a team, and then we've been working on the board together, and now the tech tour is basically with experienced people who've been in the organization for several years, and so I think it's a very well-oiled system, and I don't see any other company that is helping startup that have lived for 25 years, and most of them probably have disappeared or morphed in something different because they were not sharing that value. They were trying to maximize profits.
yeah.
And I must say that William had a very big task and difficulty to go through the COVID, which was a
Mm,
very, very difficult period, but has done incredible work to digitize the tech tour and to bring basically that community around other mediums. And this has been, super impressive how
mm,
he's done it.
yeah. The the crisis of COVID brought on the possibility of us understanding virtual, being able to work virtually. And also, it completely changed how we think about how we work together in teams as well. How you can now remove that proximity gap that you talked about in the beginning and be
Yeah,
able to
completely.
work, take the best possible people, no matter where they are, and learning how to work together. I have two final questions for you. And the first one would be, and I can never avoid the opportunity to ask someone like yourself about this, Sven. It's like, how do you see the future of this ecosystem and this industry evolving? We're in a time right now where things are changing really rapidly. And so it's really interesting to take someone like yourself, ask someone like yourself a question about where you see this 25 years from now. And also, what role might you see TechTour playing even into that future? So two questions is how do you see that future evolving, and what role do you think TechTour might have?
Yeah. So it's something that I should discuss with William, by the way. But my view is as I mentioned, there is venture-ready companies, which is a minority, and there is all the rest.
Yeah.
And I think we have a very big responsibility to help basically the other. It doesn't mean that because a VC is saying no to a company that is necessarily bad, but as I mentioned, a company is a whole. And if you have one or two gaps in the company, a VC would say, "Okay, sorry, but come back." And typically, they don't come back. And by the way, there is more company funded by business angel and non-VC than VCs.
Mm.
And then there is also a lot of money that is poured by governments into the environment, into the ecosystem for entrepreneurship, and that money should be maximized, and it needs to be I would say surrounded by people who can help that money to be efficiently spent, and to have an organization that fill those gaps. And so I see the TechTour as this organization in Europe that can, while we are evolving, and I don't know what will be the challenges in 25 years, but will be, of course, very different from the one we have today, but constantly to adapt and to fill those gaps that will be created by an evolving ecosystem, to make sure that as many entrepreneurs as possible manage to get to the final line and to be able to raise money and to create big success for Europe. And so the TechTour has a big responsibility on the entrepreneurship. I think there is also a possibility that I envisage for venture apprenticeship, if you want, for people who want to be VCs. And the TechTour is a great platform for people who want to approach and start maybe looking at companies from close, and then they start to understand how the system works. So I haven't discussed that with William, but I think that we could also create some programs that would help to train want to be venture capitalists or people who are super interested. It might be their first job. And I think it's good for the ecosystem to have as many people who understand how venture capital works. You don't need to be at the end of the day a general partner of one of the best VC in Europe, but at least you understand the mechanism, because wherever you will work, in government, in a law firm, in a management consultant, everywhere, understanding how venture works is super beneficial for the entire ecosystem.
Sven, I really, really like what you initially started with at the very beginning of this discussion, which is saying that Silicon Valley is one model. Copying that model is not necessarily the solution. It's Europe finding its own model, which suits and fits a European way of thinking. And as you're talking about this, I really, really agree with you. And I love your thoughts about developing this ecosystem further in the future, both for those entrepreneurs who aren't yet VC ready, but still encouraging them so that they continue with their ideas until they're ready for VC. And then also developing the venture community and helping that to develop so that we develop and end up with something that's ultimately not a copy of Silicon Valley, but something uniquely European.
Exactly.
Sven, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you. And again, congratulations on 25 years of a journey with TechTour, and looking forward to 25 more.
Thank you so much for your time, and long life to the TechTour.